Hello, my name is Mike back to another Power channel. I'm Jacob J Books Corner, and today we're talking about my 5 worst books of 2024. And yes, these books fucking suck, so it's the worst list. I do have 2 most disappointings, which we'll start with first. You guys don't know how this goes. Normally, my worst books are picked from my 1s and my 2s, and my most disappointings are picked from my 2s and my 3s. Just because normally I don't really give out many 1s, unshockingly, and so they are pretty high up on the list. But I do give out a 1 because that means I truly hated the thing, or I truly thought like it was unreadable and I don't recommend. It's one or the other. Either I have no opinions on it and I just thought this is the worst time of my life and that's all. The story didn't offend me, but everything else did. Or it's the worst book I've ever read in my life, and please, for the love of God, do not even think about touching it. Ironically, I think I read a lot of these for videos, so if they are a video adjoined to it, I will link you in the cards. Alright, that being said, let's get started with the most disappointing on this list. Both these books, I think I gave around a 3. The first one being The Brightness Between Us, which is the sequel. Oh, both of these are both sequels, by the way. A sequel to my favorite book of all, one of my favorite books of all time, The Darkness Outside of Us. Brightness Between Us just caught me off guard. This is a book that I can clearly say I didn't want a sequel to, and I didn't like what I got, because I didn't want it in the first place. And you might be saying, okay, well, you didn't have to read it. I did have to read it. You know, like when you read a sequel and you're like, oh, I didn't really want that, but then you got it anyways, so you're like, okay, I'll humor the author. I'll read it. I really like the author. I really wanted to support the author as well. That was also another big reason why I read it. Elliot Schaefer needs to continue writing young adult, whatever it might be that really fuels him, because I absolutely love his writing. I didn't really know where the story was going. This story is told through 2 timelines. I can't really talk too much about it without spoiling the first book. This is a very true sequel, in my opinion, in that regard. So it starts with 2 storylines, one that takes place before the mission in the first book, the second one taking place after the events of the first book. That's all I can really tell you. The Darkness Outside of Us follows 2 people who are sent on a mission to Titan to rescue his sister, essentially. She was sent there to see if Titan was habitable because Earth is becoming uninhabitable, and so they're trying to find another habitable planet, and they're on a rescue mission. And then things happen. This also has its twists and turns, nowhere near as good in my opinion. The romance is still as good as well, and I really don't like a certain trope that I would say is used here in particular. The next one we're going to talk about is The Church of Friendo, which is the possible final book in the Friendo trilogy. I don't know if there's going to be more. I'm not sure if I'll read it. It depends on who it's about. This one was the furthest away from Friendo, in my opinion, that we could get. Essentially, the way I highly recommend, I still highly recommend Clowns in the Cornfield, which is the first book in this series. Clowns in the Cornfield 2, I enjoyed it much better on reread. I don't think that's going to be the case for Church of Friendo, but maybe I'll be wrong. I don't know. Clowns in the Cornfield is, in my opinion, a perfect slasher, and if you don't read the epilogue, you're satisfied, and you can move on with life. You don't have to continue onward. The second one, also another one, I feel like it wraps up pretty nicely in the end. You don't have to read it if you don't really care. I mean, honestly, the ending of that book is saying, hey, this is a possibility. It's the same case with Church of Friendo. The first one, I would say, is more like Scream. The second one is more like The Purge. The third one is that weird religious flick where you're like, why did you put it in this trilogy? I don't know, but here it is. We all know it. We've all seen it. We've all watched it when it comes to horror, where it goes oddly in a direction of like Jesus, and you're like, I don't know how these connect, but I guess they don't. In Adam Sass's defense, Church of Friendo, I think on paper made a lot of sense. I do understand how making Friendo into a Jesus type character could be, and I get it. It's on the evidence of the novels that were presented before it. I just don't like the execution of it. Also, I'm a big believer. If you set up all these little storylines in book 2 about all these characters that I end up really loving for, where are they? Why are they not here? The only character that's the same between them all, I don't even want to tell you because it's a slasher, so I don't want to spoil anything, is a certain person, and they're in all 3 books. And this is another one of those ones. And then they bring in another character who's in a completely different town, who's dealing with Friendo, but also dealing with some really other weird shit. Really weird culty religious shit that I can only explain in culty religious. I didn't like it. It didn't vibe for me. I was really disappointed with it. It took me a long time to read. Both these books took me a long time to read because it was one of those times where I was like, maybe the ending will get me, maybe this will get me, and none of it got me. Alright, now we're moving into my top 5 worst books of the year. By the way, I will have to say, almost all these do have a common theme. It is just what it is. And if you don't like the fact they all have a common theme, or this common particular theme, Number 5, few books this year about possession of objects taking over some people's lives, and this was by far the worst one I read, and that's How to Make a Horror Movie and Survive by Craig DeLuca. Craig DeLuca was an author that's been recommended to me several times for his horror writing, in particular horror thriller / writing. My sister's recommended a few books, you guys have recommended a few books before. I don't think I'm going to read anything else from this author. I think this was a 2-star if I'm not mistaken. I don't think it was a 1, but on retrospect, I think it's more like a 1.75. I think all of these are at least a 1.75 in my. Compared to Luca, I just really hate how he writes female characters, or in this particular space. We're following a screenwriter / director who is getting ready to direct or write his next film. This book is taking place was trying to find actors to film to be in this movie, but also him rewriting the same script a billion times, which is really taxing to read in my opinion, which is crazy because like I like the idea of it. I just think the execution was kind of shit. Plus, we're following, there's this old camera from back when, like really like in the 70s and stuff, that he really wants. Essentially, this is another one of those ones where there was a movie that was made a long time ago. A lot of people think it's cursed because like 17 people died on the set. And this one in particular was a plane crash that murdered everybody, and it was all filmed on this camera. And so he thinks that's the best way to film his next movie, is to film on this particular camera. This camera is possessed. If you step in front of this camera while it is filming, you are destined to die. It's just what it is. It's just life. That's just how you're gonna go. There is slight animal cruelty inside this one as well. It's very quick. It did catch me a little bit off guard, so I just want to put the warning out there. There's not many pets in it, so I'm pretty sure you can figure it out once you start it who the animal that's gonna die is. I really hated the female character in particular. The love interest here I felt like was pretty god awful, but also the main character was extremely unlikable. I also don't love how sometimes authors treat like movie media in certain ways, and this is another one of those cases where I'm not saying that Hollywood isn't like this. I'm just saying that I don't think it's as egregious as this book's made it out to be, in my opinion. The kills were not good enough either for me to like root for the camera. I just don't think I like possessed objects and murdering people. I have not enjoyed one of them yet. This is just by far the worst one, because particularly how the female character is written here, the final girl. Disgusting, in my opinion. Speaking of disgusting female written characters, can you see the trend? Yeah, I'm so sorry. Is number 4, and that is Dino Island. I don't actually think that's what the book is called, but you can just tell based on the cover, okay? It's not that shocking. This was my original first pick of the year. Isn't that crazy? I read it for my 3rd pick of the year because I still couldn't convince myself until the 3rd book. But I did end up eventually reading it. Dino Island follows 4 girls who end up being trapped in the prehistoric era with their history teacher who they all want to bang. I was under the impression that it was Dino Smut, which sounds crazy in itself, but I read a few Dino Smuts and I feel like it's written really well. It could be something. What a weird sentence to put on the internet. This was not it, in my opinion. I've seen other people talk about it, which was really crazy to me. I was like, no one else is going to know what this is. I don't even know how did I find this? Why was this in my number generator? Why was this even in my TBR to begin with? Who the fuck knows? But I'm so mad I had to put myself through this experience. There's gratuitous sex scenes that make no sense. They're all underage, or all 18. The professor's like 26 or 28 or something like that. So like it's like 10 years. It was really uncomfortable. I really didn't like it. None of the characters were smart. It wasn't for me. I can't see any redeemable qualities here. Number 3 is The Boys Volume 1, or Omnius Volume number 1. This contains the first like 7 volumes in one. And I read it because The Boys Season 4 came out. I love the television show. But everybody on Twitter is like, oh my god, the TV show's so woke. The books are the definition of anti-woke. And I was like, okay, what the fuck does that mean? Let me read it and find out. I guess it means like really cruelty to women. Fascinating. I didn't know. Because that's all this is. It's simply women torture porn. I was shooketh. I mean, I wasn't, because like Homelander is Homelander, which we all know Homelander's Homelander. But the way they treat, I can't think of her name, she's on the boys team, was atrocious. Stargirl, oh my god, don't even get me started. Everything about it was just a lot, but also like it wasn't fun to read. It was like shock value for no reason. And there's like really graphic scenes in it, which I was really shocked by. There's just a lot of things in this book that I was really shocked by. And I watched the TV show, and the TV show is really shocking on its own, but somehow I think the way that Greg Crippy writes it and things is a lot more nuanced, and the characters and the acting is a lot more nuanced. The person who plays Homelander is so much more nuanced than whatever this fucking thing is. I don't know. Number 1 and 2 I feel like could also be interchangeable depending on the day. However, I do have a phobia of a carrot, so we'll talk about it in a second. Number 2 is Immortal Pleasures by V. Castro. V. Castro wrote a book called Born to Filth, which I thought was really uncomfortable, and every time I ever talk about it with anybody else, they're like, I can't believe that was ever written, which is fascinating, but I think it was really good for what it was. This one, I was like, ooh, vampires, ooh, sexy, ooh, no. In my opinion, and this is no shame to V. Castro, I didn't like her, I don't know why this was on my 24 and 24. No shame. This was a 1.5, and like a really bad 1.5 at that. This really does feel like we're drawing the line if this should ever got published to begin with. I don't think it was ready. So it's telling this girl in the 1900s, 1800s, something along those lines. She is changed into a vampire to escape the life that she is living, and then we're jumping forward, going back and forth, telling her story beforehand and her story now. She is someone who is a curator who goes and gets objects from other countries and takes them back to their home countries and things like that people have stolen over the ages and stuff. That's her job. And there's aspects of this that I find interesting, I will not lie. However, the writing is atrocious. It's some of the worst writing I think I have read in a very, very long time. This screamed to me like we're in the middle of a second draft and we have to hit publish. It was really shocking. And I really hate saying that because I'm a writer and I know that feeling, and I just really wish this book went through a lot of edits. Also, I really wish that someone would have heard the pitch and been like, I think it could be a cool idea, but it's not. Like, it is, but it's not. I don't know how to describe it. There's also two relationships involved, one towards the beginning, one towards the end. I don't really want to give too many spoilers in case you have any desire to read this. No one, in my opinion, and all the reviews have been really bad for it as well. The first one is her with a human, and all I'm gonna say is that they use butter for something. That alone should have given it 0 stars. Alrighty, that's Moral Pleasures by V. Castro. My worst book of the year. The book that will be cemented into my brain even as much as I try to peel it out. That is Frisky the Snowman. This is about a woman. I don't know how much I can talk about here. I read one of the first videos I put out this year was I read 5 books about women having special times with inanimate objects. This is the video. They're all novellas. They're all like pillows or things. And there's like some good stuff in here. There's some like really bad stuff. This is about as bad as it can get. Frisky Snowman is about a woman who really likes snowmen and carrots. And that's all I'm gonna say. There's a thing that has to deal with snow later on. And I was like, oh. And then there's other stuff that's like, oh. I don't understand how anybody could find this arousing. I don't understand how anybody could find this amusing. I just think this is one of the worst things that's ever been written in my life. I just don't know how. I have no words. I have no functionality. That being said, those are the top 5 worst books I read this year. Let me know in the comments down below. What were your worst books? I don't know which one's coming out first, the worst or the best. But yeah,